I'd like to move on now and talk a little bit about tax-related issues that come up in the division of marital assets.
Okay.
So, of course, one of the biggest assets that gets divided in a divorce is the marital home. Are there tax consequences to selling the marital home or to making a decision to keep the marital home that people should be thinking about?
Yeah, so, like any other asset, a home tends to be, a significant long-term capital asset, meaning significant that it usually makes up a big portion of the family's portfolio. Long-term meaning that you hold it for over a 12-month period. There's different types of income tax treatment to that. One of the important things that people run into is that like any other asset, you buy something for $5, you sell it for $10, you have $5 of gain that you have to pay tax on. And usually with a married couple, when they're buying and selling their primary residence, they're able to avail themselves of their Section 121 capital gains tax exemption, meaning that a married couple can exempt up to $500,000 of gain. So a lot of married couples, when they go to sell their primary residence, don't end up paying capital gains tax because of that $500,000 exemption. Now, a single person is only able to avail themselves of a $250,000 exemption, which is still a good amount. But one thing to consider is that with the divorcing parties is, when did you buy the home? What did you buy it for? Because that's really where we start with our basis. And what are the long-term plans with respect to the home? Are we going to get a divorce and then a year later there'll be a sale of the home? And so potentially we should look at what the couple bought the property for, and the spouse that's going to retain ownership of that property, what their projected gain will be on the sale of that property, and whether that $250,000 exemption covers them or not. It's a less of a concern if it's going to be a long-term property for the family, but certainly something to consider. What's not only the division of assets, but what's the long-term plan with those assets? How long do couples intend to hold on to them?
Right. That could be a nasty surprise for somebody who thought they were going to keep the marital home and then decided to sell it a year or two later and was hit with the full capital gains tax.
Yeah, and maybe it's a motivation for the couple to sell the home prior to divorce, so you get the $500,000 exemption, and one spouse is able to take the equity and roll it over into another property.
And what about with stock? So oftentimes people own stock that gets divided between the parties at the time of the divorce. Should they be thinking about capital gains in that context also?
Yeah, I think of it again, a facts and circumstance. The home is certainly a significant asset, and so the biggest difference between the home and the stocks is that we don't get that capital gains tax exemption. So you bought the Apple stock for $5, it's now $10. There will be gain when that's sold. So part of the consideration should be is that after the division of assets, it's to what extent is the spouse going to need to tap into those assets? Is there going to be a sale in the near future? One other thing to consider is that to the extent there is any gifted property throughout generations, sometimes we have generous parents who, for one reason or another, decide to give that same stock to their kids. They've been holding on to it for a longer period of time. There might be much more greater gain baked into that asset. So I think part of it would be, to what extent, how long has the couple been holding on to this asset? How much has it appreciated? What's the plan with that asset post division of assets? Whether or not they're going to need to tap into it. So I think it plays a factor. I don't know if I don't know anecdotally if anyone has ever really picked and choose between the stock portfolio, that they wanted the AT&T stock versus the IBM stock because of the gain baked in there. But I think it's certainly something that should be on the table.
Yeah, that was the question I was just going to ask, which is if you have a large portfolio of stocks and some of them were purchased at different times. Oftentimes people are just looking at the present day value, but maybe it's worth thinking about what the basis is and the gain and considering the tax issues
Yeah,
if it's a large number of stocks.
I would say that, it's, I don't think that, it's how much time and effort needs to be put into it. But I think that if it's big enough, and most financial institutions are able to generate statements that have the basis on there, that if you, again, if you've got assets that have significant gain, that might impact not just the division between 60/40 of the portfolio, but what makes up that 60/40.
Right. Okay. Lots to think about.